Welcome to the second Jetmir demonstration game. In this particular game, I end up mulliganing to 5, but still am able to close out the game. If you're not familiar with cockatrice replays, during the replay, you will see each opponent's hand, but in the actual game, obviously, you don't see other players' hands. So just something to be aware of if you're not familiar with cockatrice. So this is our opening hand, and it doesn't meet any of the criteria for an opening hand, at least the ones listed in my primer. Arguably, you can keep it because it has an Esper Sentinel. You can go turn 1, Esper Sentinel, and then hope to draw into more cards. And by that logic, arguably you could keep this hand. It's not a hand I recommend keeping in the primer, simply because without acceleration you are kind of slow, and you're also kind of land heavy. In general, in most commander games, 5 lands is not a hand you want to keep unless one of those cards happen to be like a tutor and then the other card is something that's really synergistic with something else you can grab in the deck. So this hand, in my opinion, is a mull, and it's certainly what I did during this game, although I can see argument for potentially keeping it. So here we lost the die roll, but we are going second. So I mulled into this, which is also not good. Elspeth is a 6-drop. Scoot Swarm is a token maker, but then the rest of the hand, again, no acceleration, and we only have 1 land this time. This isn't something I can keep, so we gotta take another mulligan, go down to 6. But our mull to 6, unfortunately, has no lands whatsoever, and so therefore I am forced at this point to go down to 5 and keep pretty much what I get with 5 if it is technically playable, and this is technically playable. And again, another 5 land mulligan and 2 non-lands, but we're already going down to 5 at this point. We can't go to 4, so we gotta keep it. So here I end up keeping this, pitching the 2 lands I consider to be the worst, and just accepting that I'm going to have a slow start. So I pitched the Aura Shards because I didn't want to pitch another land. I figure even if I have a slow start, then I just need to draw at least 1 land to eventually play a Tender Street Dryad. In worst case scenario, I end up playing a Tender Street Dryad on turn 5. Aura Shards, the issue with Aura Shards, yes, you could cast it turn 3 and have nothing to trigger it for potentially 2 more turns, but Aura Shards is a card that tends to make you a target, tends to make people want to come after you. And so just playing Aura Shards with a weak opening hand and nothing to back it up is not, in my opinion, a good play. Now, if it was like Rhystic Study, then sure. If it actually drew you more cards, then sure, your opening hand could be trashed and you could play card advantage. But Aura Shards definitely is not something you just run out there and be like, I've got nothing to back this up, and then people will just come after you because you have Aura Shards, and that's not where you want to be. So go ahead and speed this up a little bit. Here we simply play a land and pass. We don't really have much to do. Everyone else, kept 7-hand opening mulligan, and so there's not much that we can really do to compete with that. We do draw into an Elvish Mystic, that is good, but our hand is still, again, pretty weak, and we just have to hope for good draws. So then there's a stacks piece that's come down by the Adeline player, and that's going to greatly influence everyone else who's, well, especially the Ghyrson Starn player, who seems to have a lot of non-creature spells. But for the Adeline player, this is certainly a ideal opening. Stacks everyone else when you're a creature deck, and then come out of the gate swinging. And then we obviously are not in the best position here. So as you can see, just really slow start on our part. We just drew into another high cost card. Not much we can do. We have to take the human token hit here. then here we're just going to take a bunch of poison counters. I don't really see a lot of poison counters or poison counter decks in Commander. Generally, if you sit down with a poison deck, you're just going to get hated on, but I do think that with the introduction of Infect and Toxic, I think that it's become a little bit more viable. But there's really not that much we can do. And here, we finally have gotten to turn 4, and we can cast Tender Shoot Dryad. And I think in this situation, when you see Adeline has been cast along with the stacks piece, you're naturally thinking that someone's probably going to play a board wipe. Board wipe is likely imminent. Nobody wants Adeline to stay in play, or at least some sort of creature removal. Because if Adeline swings twice, then it can be argued that a board wipe is, you pretty much have to have a board wipe. A single target removal piece on Adeline after she's gotten 2 swings in is not very effective. Especially because Adeline costs 3 and they probably will have 5 mana soon, so they can just recast Adeline and do it again. And so I'm basically betting that they're not going to have a board wipe, but instead single target removal. And that's simply because the other option I had was to simply pass, betting that someone had a board wipe. But I don't generally like playing around phantom cards that opponents could have. And so even though it is very much in a situation where someone wants to play a board wipe, I think we have to run out the Tender Shoot Dryad in case that doesn't happen, and because we need blockers. So that was my logic here. We start getting Saberling tokens. Here, the Adeline player is, as you can see, when Adeline gets cast and they swing and then makes it back around to their turn cycle and then they attack again, it starts to get a little crazy because this guy, Baragond of the Guard, triggers every time a human enters under the player's control, and Adeline happens to create 3 human tokens whenever Adeline attacks. And so that's going to be 3 triggers of Baragond, and it just starts getting a little nutty when you just look at how fast Adeline explodes. And this is pretty much just begging, like, someone's got to have a board wipe here, or single target removal. Here, looks like the Toxic player is just going to get in some more poison counter damage, and then is going to wipe the board. And there's nothing we can do to save it. We don't have the mana. We've had a slow start. We pretty much just have to accept the loss. But when something like this happens, anything that slows down the game, such as removal, stacks, those sorts of things tend to benefit the people that have had a slow start, or at least it gives them more time. When stacks and removal are not played, then everyone who has had a slow start is just incredibly punished. And the people that are just coming out of the gate swinging, this is why I don't play like very low casual power games either. It's really a snowball effect in those sorts of games, whereas the more interactive games are actually more fair. So here we take the board wipe. Not much we can do about it. We draw swords. Not much we can really do. Can't even cast the Dragonlair Spider. Everyone else is building up their board. Divine Visitation gets played. Kind of a cute card with Adeline, but obviously very scary as well. We have Shield. That's a draw engine here. Knight's Whisper, drawing into more cards, and then our turn comes, and we finally can play our other token engine in our hand because we have hit 6 lands. And some of you who have never played a Dragonlair Spider or have not played a token deck that runs Dragonlair Spider, this game is a perfect example of why this card is good. Anytime an opponent casts a spell, we're going to get a 1/1. And that greatly increases our ability to get to the critical mass count for Dragonlair Spider, as you're going to see right here. So like These two players just made me collectively 5 tokens. We're now at 6. If we just get 3 more insect tokens, we're now at critical mass level for Jetmir. And so that is the power of some of these more expensive token makers in the deck. They can really run wild after a board wipe. And so here, I think the mistake here is that if you're the Adeline player and you are counting with Jetmir, you definitely swords the Dragon Lair Spider before casting all of these. But in my experience, and you've probably seen this in the other demonstration games as well, is that nobody wants to waste their swords or their single target removal, it seems, on the token maker that's making 1/1s. And instead, there's usually, and I don't want to say no one wants to, it's that usually there is a much more threatening target, at least on the board, at least more obvious threatening target on the board. And that's kind of the running theme of a lot of my decks, is that they're subtle. Usually someone else has a more important target to get rid of. And so a lot of my games, it looks like I'm just getting away with things that I shouldn't be, but that's just because, if you're actually in this position, if you look at this replay, if you look at all these replays and you're like, well, they could have just hit your token maker. And yeah, they could have. But if you were actually in these games, you're probably not thinking that. You probably have some other target that looks better. I have a Dragon Lair Spider, and you can swords it, but I'm also the guy that mulled the 5, have 2 cards in hand, and this guy over here, the Infect player, has a card draw engine in play. And so it's kind of like, pick your poison here. And a lot of times it's going to go toward the one that tends to draw more hate, which is probably not the Dragon Lair Spider. It's probably going to be something like Lashiel or Skrelv. Here, at this point, I am at critical mass with all of these spells played. Come over to my turn. I simply cast Jetmir, and I do have the Tibalt's Trickery to counter one blowout. But the thing to understand is that everyone's tapped out, and so it's got to be some sort of free spell. This guy has no cards in hand, Adeline player. They went full on aggro with limited card draw, it seems, which in my opinion is a mistake. And so really it's just some sort of 0 cost card that might come from one of these other 2 players. So here, obviously we swing out, and because 2 players are at least down to low life, we can just kill 2 of them. The Adeline player has no cards left in hand, even though he's at 40 life, and then game's over. So yeah, that is a demonstration of the Jetmir deck and a Mull the 5. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this sort of content, then please consider hitting that subscribe button.